Well, this morning I'm joined by Craig Murray, who serves as one of our governing elders on the Governance Coordinating Committee made up of sessions. Session is made up of 24 governing elders, and about every 4 to 6 weeks, we try to give like a check-in or update on the pastoral search process for our next senior pastor. And today, what we like to do is share what we would call frequently asked questions that the congregation that you all been asking. And if you were here last month, you heard Craig saying something like, for the past 2 senior pastor searches here at HB Press, it's taken about 24 months, and the current search is taking a little over a year so far now. And we also heard from the pastor nominating committee, PNC, that they are unified, that they are excited about the future of our church, and they are at peace. But one of the questions that we get asked often is a question of, why does it take so long to find a senior pastor? And we recognize that the search for a senior pastor is not like finding a CEO or finding a president of company, because there is a spiritual discernment process that's involved. Can you share a little bit more about that from Sessions' perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Yes, and from a Sessions perspective is we really feel very strongly the conviction to live into our theological beliefs. And one of those beliefs is that the Holy Spirit is actually present in and through all believers. And so as we as a church family, when we enter into a season of significant discernment like this, it's really a discernment process for the entire congregation and not just a select few. And so with that in mind, the process that's set forth is really designed as a feature, not a flaw, to give us time to listen to the Holy Spirit. In fact, I remember one of the first conversations we had with Jay as part of our committee that was developing and identifying what our process was going to be was the question came up as, well, should we form a slate-making team like we've done before to identify and put together the pastoral nominating committee? And my first thought, frankly, was, are you seriously going to form a committee to form a committee?
Yes.
And the answer was, well, we don't have to, but as we talked about it, we realized that there was wisdom in that, because it was the way in which the congregation as a whole could help guide the selection of the people that God was appointing for the pastor nominating committee. And in that process, the congregation nominated, and in that process, the congregation affirmed. And in that process, after the PNC was formed, the congregation has participated in small groups, focus groups, town halls, and conversations to help lead and guide and direct the process. And so as a result, that is how we as a congregation discern the direction of the Lord in this regard.
But at some point, the spiritual discernment process will end. The PNC will come to us with a name, with our final candidate, so to speak. For the last 4 years, we have added 1,000 new covenant partners, meaning that we have people from different traditions, different denominations, different backgrounds. They may not know the procedure of how we elect a new senior pastor. Can you tell us, from a governance standpoint, what does that procedure look like?
Yeah, so there won't be any white smoke going up from White Garden. It's going to actually be something really simple that you'll receive an email that will be announcing a congregational meeting that'll happen about 2 weeks or so after the email arrives. And in that congregational meeting, it'll probably be scheduled for after this service for most to have the largest amount of people to be able to attend. And then in that meeting, the PNC will present the name of the man or woman that God has guided them to choose as our next senior pastor. And they'll explain a little bit as to how they discerned that and the way that they came to unity in that decision.
Following up on that, one of the questions that we get asked is, will the congregation get to hear from this new potential pastor? Will there be like a dueling preach-off where we get to participate and vote on who we want? Do we get to hear from this person before that day?
Well, a dueling preach-off would be interesting, but probably not productive.
Yes.
And the answer actually is no, that the congregation doesn't get to meet or hear the pastor before they are presented. And that is actually the trust that we're placing in the task we've given to the PNC to discern this process. But it also is part of the reason why it explains why we put so much effort into discerning who is part of the PNC, and it explains why we need to be so dedicated in praying for them, because that's our participation, that's our role in this season to help them find and identify who that person is for the future.
Right.
And with that in mind, Jay, we're talking a lot. We last month about praying for the PNC and all, but we've also just recognized that there's a discernment on our end as a congregation, but there's a discernment on the other side as well. And you've been a pastor who has discerned God's calling into ministry. You've guided and shepherded other pastors in discerning that calling. How can we be praying for that person?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I think we need to remember that the PNC, they're looking for someone who is so fully satisfied and joyous in their current church context. So when they receive that phone call from our PNC, there is this spiritual, holy disruption that takes place in their life, and they go through this spiritual agony for weeks and months. That's why it's a spiritual discernment process. And we cannot forget that there's a congregation on the other side at some point that they're going to lose their beloved, cherished pastor. So they'll be going through some heartache as well. So I think the far as prayer-wise, we need to be praying for not only for our next senior pastor, but also for the family members of the senior pastor, as well as the congregation that's going to lose their pastor. And we need to remember that there's only one church of Jesus Christ. We come together as one body. And I'm so thankful for you all, for the congregation, as you've been praying. You've been rallying for the last 24 months. And we're so grateful that we get to participate and do this together. This is a corporate process of spiritual discernment. Thank you. Thank you for praying. We're so grateful. And having said that, I'd like to invite Sterling up as she leads us in time of prayer.